And we are rolling. So, welcome back to the Dynasty Dumpster Fire podcast. This is your host, Tanner or TK, and I'm joined, as always, by my fantastic co host, Marty D. Marty D, happy Thanksgiving week, sir.
Happy Thanksgiving week, man. Hope you're ready for another round of football in less than 5 days.
Yeah, I'm ready, I guess. I don't like the Thanksgiving games all that much, but um, we get to see Cooper Rush and Tommy DeVito. So,
Oh my
um,
goodness, it's going to be quite the extravaganza.
yeah, it's not going to be good. And then we get the Raiders too, I think. But anyways, that's Black Friday, but I digress. So,
Yes.
quick little trade show today, guys. Since it is Thanksgiving week, we are going to try and knock this out relatively quickly because of travel and things. So, um, we're going to go through, discuss some trades that have gone on in one of our leagues that we are in together because the trade deadline came about this week. And there was a kind of a flurry of deals, not as much as maybe I would have expected, but some went through. So just to give some context on the league itself, and for anybody that's not that wants visuals, the YouTube version of this will have screenshots and visual for the trade, and on audio we'll just do our best to explain audibly. But the league is 12 teams, full PPR. It is Superflex, non-tight end premium, and these trades are all from a span of about 2 weeks, leading up to the trade deadline. And both for extra context, both Marty and I are members of this league. So hopefully, maybe one of these times we'll do a league recap episode where we actually go through the league and talk about our own teams and things like that, and some of the other teams in the league. But just know this is one of our most active leagues out of the two that we're in together. All right, so we're going to start with deal number one. So deal number one was done in week 10, and it was team one receives Trevor Lawrence and Cedric Tillman. Team two receives Justin Herbert. So you put these trades together, so I'm going to let you maybe lay out a little extra context about the teams here, and then tell me your thoughts before I give mine.
Sure. So Team One was in a rebuild stage. They are not actively competing, nor was seeking to compete. And they acquired Trevor Lawrence and Cedric Tillman. While Team Two was looking to compete, and they were looking to revamp the quarterback situation. And I thought this was a very solid move. Um, at the time, Week 10, Cedric was hot, and I do think that has kind of simmered a bit. I'm sure he'll bounce back. I heard, if I remember correctly, he got a concussion on that Thursday night snowy game. So as long as he clears protocols, he'll be able to play Sunday. Sorry, Monday. Apologies. But the point being is that I thought this was a great trade for Team Two. What were your thoughts?
So in terms of quarterback rankings overall, I'm pretty high on Herbert just because I think that he's kind of I feel like he's been underrated the last season or two just because of various injuries and the coaching changes and things that have gone on, as well as the coaching hire that he had. I'm definitely taking Herbert over Lawrence by a lot. If you look at, just to kind of give some context here, if you look at on the season, Herbert is currently quarterback 14 in 4-point passing touchdowns. And that is despite quite a few stinkers towards the beginning of the year while he was dealing with an ankle injury, as well as a new coach that was pounding the rock constantly. But if you look since the bye, man, 14 PPR, 14 points, not so good, 15, but then it kind of jumps up in terms of his passing and rushing volume, 30 points, 23, 22, 25, 18. So I'm definitely high on Herbert. Tillman doesn't do anything for me. I think he's a flash in the pan type player. And I do think Lawrence will improve, and I do think there's some upside for him. But I think the gap between Herbert and Lawrence is significantly bigger than Cedric Tillman. So I'm with you on that one. I think rebuilder or contender, I'm taking the Herbert side there.
No, for sure, for sure. I think for the immediate impact and just long term, I think just the situationship that Herbert's in speaks volume. We really don't know what's going to come of Lawrence until next year.
We need them badly to hire a good coach, man. Like, they've got to hire a good coach. He's in Lawrence's defense, he's never had a good coach. So I am patient with Lawrence. I do think he's a good quarterback, but Herbert's got Harbaugh, and Harbaugh is those hardballs are quarterback whisperers, man. So,
Well, let me ask this before we move to trade two. We have to be patient with Lawrence. He got the extension. How long, as Dynasty, enthusiast, should we be with Lawrence? Is next year the make or break it?
well, yeah, next year I guess will be year 5. At that point, I do think we have to kind of just make a determination about him at that point, whether it's due to him, whether it's due to the organization he's a part of. Um, let's say, for example, the Jags get Ben Johnson or one of those guys, like the guy from the Lions who is killing it as the OC. Then I think Lawrence is looking fantastic for the prices you were able to buy him at. If they go out and hire somebody that's questionable again and he's having to deal with mediocrity at coach again, then I think maybe it's time to just understand he's going to be a quarterback 2 career guy and just kind of maybe a bye week fill in, low end quarterback 2 type of dude. So you're right. Next year is a big year for him. So I'll be interested to see because I think the Jags have a lot of good pieces, but they need to get it together.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to trade number 2. So I recognize this one. Trade number 2 was just completed this past week. Team 1 received Josh Downs and a 25 fourth. Team 2 received DeAndre Swift and a 25 second, projected to be mid to late based on the context of the team that it came from. And again, I know this because this is my trade. So I was on the Downs side. For extra context, I'm 11-1 in this league. Currently the heavy favorite, but I know anything could happen at any time, so I'm not taking anything for granted. I'm just trying to take it week by week. Pretty much pickless. Now I actually am pickless, except for one first 2 years out that I'm going to hold on very dearly to. But I was also heavy at running back. I have John Taylor. I have Saquon. I have Stevenson. I have Chuba Hubbard and Brooks. So I wanted to try to re-roll that to another Swift to another competitor and try to make it turn him into a receiver and a young receiver that I actually really like a lot. And I kind of talked about this on the mock draft that we did is Josh Downs. So the guy was trying to get rid of Josh Downs and I came in and made an offer. And I think that it was, I switched the screen. I'm sorry. I thought that it was a pretty fair deal all around, although I would have liked to have gotten a third instead. Fourth was decided on. So before I make my quick case for Josh Downs, tell me your thoughts honestly on the deal in terms of context.
Before his injury this past weekend, I thought it was a solid move. I still think it's a solid move long term. I know Swift is contracted up and should play another good year of football in Chicago, but it's evident that Pittman's time, like all receivers, comes to an end. I think he's still a solid wide receiver 3 moving forward. But I do think his wide receiver 1 tenure is over in Indianapolis, and I do think Josh Downs is the next stud receiver. He's shown the acrobatic, he's shown the mature nature of his character. I mean, everything you've seen has been good, so that's what you want as a dynasty owner. But overall, I like the trade. I think it worked out for both teams. If I remember correctly, the team that's traded for Swift needed just some more spice in their running back room. Because if I remember correctly, they didn't really have any heavy hitters. They just had, Nick
Bijan and
Chubb.
Pollard
Yeah,
and Nick Chubb.
Bijan was the biggest one, but the point is Pollard and Chubb. What are the difference? Maybe Swift may offer the passing, but at the same time, at least it gave it diversified. Maybe that's what I was trying to go after.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think since they made an OC switch in Chicago,
That's helped.
you've kind of slowly, well, it's helped the offense, but it's actually Swift himself has seen a big decrease in workload. And Roshan has actually been brought in for things like short down and distance and goal line stuff where that wasn't happening before. So I think that that limits Swift a little bit.
Okay.
That's my opinion on the matter. I mean, Josh Downs he's 23 and he's wide receiver 20 on the year, and that's missing 2.5 games. So do with that information what you will. That's also with playing with subpar quarterback play the entire year, with Michael Pittman on and off the field as well as some other competition. So I'm just a fan of Josh Downs. 600 yards on the season, 53 receptions. Again, currently wide receiver 20 in PPR at 23 years old. And I just think if this injury, I think they'll keep him out next week at New England. I think they've already said that. He'll have his bye, and I'm hoping he's back towards the end, although he is a reserve for my team. I am a big fan of Josh Downs. I think I own him in like 4 different leagues now, just because I just am a fan of what he does, and I think he's a little bit underrated. So,
Hey, I
um,
get it, man. I get it. So he's just going to be a bench stash for you for the rest of the season.
well, I mean, he might be a flex. He could be my last flex, although I do. I mean, it's you've seen my team. I don't really have he. The only place he would be is a last flex unless injuries occur. So I'll be rotating, I guess, him and Chuba Hubbard, and I guess Ramondre, and maybe Amari Cooper can ever do something. Maybe he'll actually make the lineup, but until then, I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, that was my trade. I'm glad you threw that one on here. Don't like to give up that second, but at the end of the day, I think turning Swift into a young ascending wide receiver just for a pick swap like that, I think made sense for me. So I don't know if you agree, but that was my thought.
No, totally.
All right, moving on. So second to last one here. This one is weird. So
Yeah.
this one happened this week as well. Team 1 received Bucky Irving, and Team 2 received Chris Godwin and $30 of fab. The weird thing about this is Team 1 was the contender, and Team 2 is the rebuilder. So, what do you think about Godwin versus Irving this year?
Well,
Obviously not this year, but long term.
listen, if I knew he was gonna split with that, I would have offered like Stephon Diggs or like something like that. I mean, the point is, this was a head scratcher for me. I mean, I guess 30 fab was that serious. I guess I mean, we know the league mate who's in this league, so this league mate has a habit of spending at least $1 fab each day to
And
have a
then
player off
dropping
the
them.
waiver and then drop them the day after. But to each their own. I mean, I like Bucky Irving. He must know something that we don't because he was both Rashid White and Bucky Irving. And from my understanding, what I've seen, it seems like Bucky, you can't deny it. He's going to get the job. Rashid White seems like his time is fading. My only thing though
Rashad.
is Rashad. Apologies, thank you. Is Chris Godwin is going to be a free agent next year? Do they retain him? Do they let him walk? Or if he goes somewhere, as long as he bounces back from the injury, he'll still. I think I see no reason for it to regression. But what do I know? I mean, he's 28. Bucky's 22 or 3, something like that. I mean, there's a big age gap. Like he must know something we don't. But it is a buck for buck player, though.
Yeah, I would. I'll probably take Bucky Irving here. Definitely, obviously, it makes sense for a contender because although he's not getting a ton of snap percentage, he's breaking off a lot of big plays, and he's
Yes.
also being used a lot in the passing game. He had 6 targets and receptions last week. So and 12 carries yielded 87 yards, and his yards per carry, he actually looks like a pretty good running back.
I never
Overall,
checked this
so
trade out. How did this trade come out on like the calculators and stuff like that? Was it a fair trade?
I have not looked, but I can quickly that's interesting. Let me go to
I'm about to
Casey's
type it in
KTC real
myself right
quick.
now because I'm kind of curious. But you must really assess 30 fab like that high.
No, the fab. I don't know what he wants the fab for. Like, I don't know if he's expecting people dumping
No, it's
players.
actually gone the other direction. It's a very interesting move. But at the end of the day, to each their own. I mean, everybody's allowed to make their own decision. Listen, for the competitor, I liked it. Um, I mean, yeah, I'm going with Team One.
Godwin next year maybe will be good. Again, we don't know what he's going to be. I just
No,
don't know
no.
why. Unless you're trying to, I guess the idea is he's trying to shed points, which is the only
Why?
way that this makes sense.
Yeah, but why don't you get? I guess you're right. That makes sense. But why don't you get
Somebody
like some
younger.
picks or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways,
Anyways, yeah,
yeah, weird trade, but 1-for-1. Okay, without context of this trade, 1-for-1 in Dynasty in this format. Who do you like better? No
Bucky.
matter what.
If you're looking at
You're taking
Dynasty,
Bucky?
yeah,
Okay.
this wouldn't happen in
Um,
redraft.
yeah, yeah, me too. Godwin's probably got a year or two left, but he's also got an injury history. We don't know where he'll be. So, yeah, Bucky is an ascending guy. So he's a guy that I wish I had more of. I don't really have any of those young running backs that are producing
I
right
don't.
now.
I don't. I like
Um,
him. I would probably buy him. Hey, dude, Phantom wide receiver one, Chris Godwin.
yeah, it sucks. He was having such a good season.
He
But
was. He was.
moving on to the last one here. This one's a big one. And this one I thought was relatively interesting. This was
Mm-hmm.
a buzzer beater deal. Um, Team 1 received George Pickens and Garrett Wilson. Team 2 received Joe Mixon, DK Metcalf, and Chase Brown. Both teams are competitors in this
Yes.
instance. And just for some extra convoluted context, the team that got Mixon, Metcalf, and Brown is also the team that bought Bucky. Or no, it's not.
No, no, flip it
I
around.
digress. the other one. The team that got Pickens and Wilson is also the team that got Bucky Irving. So maybe that's why he was able to ditch some of his RBs. But in a vacuum, which side are you taking here? You taking the two younger receivers, ascending receivers, or are you taking the
For the
stud running back
context
older
of the
receiver?
playoff push, I was kind of confused why the team that gave away Mixon, Metcalf, and Brown would do that. I thought it was a very self-sabotage move. I do like it. I like Garrett Wilson. I would acquire him because I'm in a rebuild. I was trying to, but I'm not big on George Pickens. I know you are. I find him very mature, and I'm concerned that he won't be able to solidify an extension because of his lack of ability to be professional. I mean, that's just the nature of it. This is my honest opinion. But Mixon has been performing when healthy. Metcalf's been performing when healthy, and Chase Brown's been electric since Moss has gone on IR. I mean, why would you give up like a 50 to 80 point, ceiling for two players that probably won't even break 40 because one has a quarterback issue, and the other one is hit hot or cold week. I mean, it all depends. And Aaron Rodgers, that's been distracting.
Yeah, I don't feel good about Wilson in terms of the rest of this season. And I don't know that who knows if he'll ever produce how he thought he was going to. I mean, he's got the talent, but man, the Jets are
Mm-hmm.
stinkers. But um, I won't argue the logistics with Pickens. I'm high on Pickens. You're low on him. Um, I do know that he's 18, wide receiver 18 on the season. I do know that he's averaging uh, I'm trying to find his average here. I do know that he's averaging a pretty decent score per week. But since Russ took over, but in as a competitive team, you got to keep Mixon, you got to keep Chase Brown. They're two smashing running backs, and then Metcalf is no slouch either. And to be honest with you, I think Metcalf. I don't think there's a huge delta between Metcalf and either one of those receivers on their own. I mean, I'll take them,
Mm-hmm.
but Metcalf is also not an old guy. He's on an ascending offense with a good young new head coach. And I'm taking the Mixon, Metcalf, and Chase Brown side with the context. Long term, I think it's a little closer because I am high on Pickens and Wilson,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
I think for this season, I mean, obviously, it's not even close for this year. So
Do you think that is a signal with the acquisition of Bucky, Pickens, and Wilson, they're going to battle the playoff race? That was their insinuation that I'm going to go young and rebuild for next year push again, or take a gamble with some young guys and hope that they can perform like vets under these. I mean, you know how it is in near the end of the season, before playoffs, and even during playoffs. Like those teams can be cold in a minute because it just be a bad week in real life NFL. Real life football can just
what
be a bunch of
what I
stinkers.
what I feel like this is I feel like the manager, I feel like the one that got Pickens and Wilson was worried about his receiver core, and it
Yeah.
was warranted because his receivers were not very good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's playing how I play. He's hedging his bets by investing in somewhat productive young players. That's how I like to build my teams. Not always the best, but the way I build my teams, and you know this is I'm way more likely to spend picks and invest in players that are young and that will hold their value and will still be productive. And that's hard to do, but I that's how I kind of try to build my teams. Now it doesn't always work out, and if Wilson face plants this year, I mean, if Pickens doesn't continue to produce and climb higher, you're going to wish, if you had a chance to win, you're going to wish you had Mixon in the playoffs, right?
Oh my god,
And
yeah.
you're going to wish you had Chase Brown. But regardless, I mean, it was definitely an interesting trade to say the least. So,
Oh, for
any
sure,
last minute
for
thoughts on
sure.
this one?
Um, been a nice four trades we went over. But this by far was the most my personal favorite because of how much value was going both directions. That's just my last thing I want to say. This was my favorite one of the four.
Real quick, just to pick your brain before we move on, is Garrett Wilson on the last slide?
Yes.
Okay, never mind. I'll save this question for then. All right. So before we close out the show here, guys, just a reminder. Please, if you could, follow us on where you listen to your podcast, whether it be Apple Podcast or Spotify. Hit the follow button, leave comments, support us there. It's very helpful. And then go ahead and subscribe on YouTube as well. All the podcasts are uploaded in full form to YouTube with visuals of whatever it is that we're talking about. So give us a subscription and a like over on YouTube as well at Dynasty Dumpster Fire on YouTube as well. So check us out there, and we appreciate all your support. And again, continue to try to push out these episodes as frequently as we can, and try to be as consistent as possible. So to end the episode, Marty's put together a end of season kind of a preference chart here with how we think 6 of the players that we talked about today are going to perform. So do you want to kind of explain the exercise here to those listening, and then we can get started?
Yeah, so we have a Venn diagram here. We have 3 circles for those unfamiliar with a Venn diagram. They cross in the middle, and we have on the left sleeper for those that may be a nice stash who would probably more likely be a push to win some major points. Breakout is already guaranteed they're going to continue to perform at a high level. And a bust, we already know what direction they're going, and it is not the direction you want for the playoffs, at least. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be good for Dynasty. It just means, in this case, for the next couple weeks, for your playoff push and in the playoffs, that they are actually going to get those numbers to get you across the line.
So, so I guess for the exercise itself, we'll talk through quickly each player, just a little bit about each one of them. We're not ranking them necessarily. We're just trying to figure out rest of season where we would put them, right? So yes. Breakout is we really want them.
Yes.
Bust is we don't think they'll be very helpful. And then sleeper is what again?
It's just going to be a 50-50, but I would argue this more like a 60-40. You're leaning towards it's going to work.
But there's a high chance it might not. Okay.
Correct. Just
all right. We'll go through and we'll just go one by one. George Pickens, where are you at with Pickens? Honestly, regardless of your bias of how you feel about him as a person, where are you rest of season with him based on what we've seen with him and Russ?
If you look at his numbers and what he's done, regardless of the situation and schedule matchup, he is a breakout in my opinion. He's already solidified himself to scoring consistent 10 to 15 points a week. To me, that's a breakout. That means he's going to get you those numbers every single week, which is something you can depend on. What do you think?
I agree. I would put him here just because of what we've seen with him and Russ. The target share, he's top 5 in end zone targets on the season, and I do think with Tomlin, I just think Tomlin's a good coach. I think Russ has unlocked him, and regardless of how you feel about his antics as a player, he is certainly performing, and it does not have any competition on that team, and there was no competition added this year. So I think he can have some wide receiver 1 weeks, but is solidly in the wide receiver 2. Top 12 to 24 range for me rest of season.
Agreed.
So
agreed.
I will go ahead and I'm gonna do Justin Herbert, and I'm gonna stick him also. I'm between breakout and bust, or breakout and sleeper. I'm gonna place him kind of in the middle here, leaning on the sleeper side, just because as long as they keep running him and they keep letting him pass at the rate that they have been over the last 4 or 5 weeks, he's going to be a breakout. I mean, he'll finish as a quarterback, whether hopefully at least a back end quarterback 1, in my opinion, just because of how talented he is. If they run the ball and they go back to that archaic style of offense they were running, he's throwing 18 times a game. They're not letting him use his legs. Then I would argue he's actually more over in this category where he will be a bust because he's not going to end up helping you for your playoff push. So I'm a big fan of Herbert. I think if they use him the right way, he's super talented. And we already kind of talked about him earlier in the show.
No, I'm with you there too, man. I think depending how it works out with the coach, with Harbaugh, we'll see the version we want. But I agree, I'd say he's more so on the sleeper breakout side because it could be a cold night, but I think for the most majority, he's going to give you those points you need. Maybe more QB2, but better than QB3 and below.
Yep, absolutely. He was tanking in the beginning of the season. So,
very.
You want to give us Garrett Wilson here.
I'm sorry, but for the playoff push, he's a bust for me. He might have an explosive week, but for dependency, I wouldn't depend on it. They have too many distractions.
They might bench Rodgers. They might cut Rodgers. I keep hearing all this stuff. I really don't love the Jets in general. Guess if I have to start a player, it's Breece Hall, but I don't want any part of the Jets otherwise. So
yes, I'm with you there.
Until they figure out their quarterback situation and until they hire a competent coach. DK Metcalf, gonna go break out here.
Same. He's solid, man.
He is, and I think He's had some injuries. The Seahawks have been in a lull. I think he's going to shoot right back up to that low end wide receiver one range as soon as they get on track, maybe as early as this week. So, yeah, I'm putting him in the breakout. I'm putting him in the you want DK on your team into season.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, you want to do Bucky?
Sure, I'm putting him in the sleeper because again, it's been inconsistent, but he's been good when it happens. You want him in your lineup. When it doesn't happen, he's on your bench, and you get a whopping 30 points there that has no value to you. I mean, he knows how to ball out, but you don't know when it's going to happen. I mean, he yields touches, at least targets to White, but at least when it comes to the ground game, it's all him, and it's pretty good what he's able to do with his legs.
And this past week, Rashad White scored. So I do think that's going to be annoying. And they're actually mixing in Sean Tucker too. I believe Sean Tucker also scored this past week. So I do
They had
think
four
that little
different rushing touchdowns.
that little and Baker, right, too.
Yeah, all four different players.
Yeah,
First
so
time in NFL history.
yeah, I don't he's good and he's talented as a contender. I don't know that I want to have to rely on him as an RB2 for the rest of the season. So
I second that.
but he can have those moments.
All right, your favorite.
Josh Downs. So for the season,
I'm telling you, he's a sleeper, sadly, just for the
yeah,
season. At
I
least for
think
the
so too.
playoffs push, especially with that injury. I know that adds some more context, but we don't know how cold they're going to start him. I don't expect them to give him an automatic push, especially when the Indianapolis themselves are, they're not going to make it to the playoffs. It's just another season for them.
Well, I don't like A Rich, number one. I just don't think he's that good. I still think Downs is good. You're right, he's injured, but Indy as a whole is not very good. And I think he can give you, so I think Josh Downs, if he can be healthy, can still give you those wide receiver 2 weeks. Still somebody you'd want as a solid flex.
Mm-hmm.
For dynasty purposes, no concerns, 23 years old for this season. He might be like Bucky, where it's like, you're going to bench him and he's going to do well, and you're going to play him and he's going to get 7 points. So I think that's where he belongs as well.
So
Any last remarks here?
Bottom line is for those listening, if you need two people to guarantee you some points, DK Metcalf and George Pickens are two suggestions. They're probably within the same ballpark for value. The positive with George Pickens, he's younger. If you don't look at his off the field behavior, you're good. But if that is a concern, then you'll know where I line. Justin Herbert is worth the gamble, but just understand that he could fall in the bust category depending how they change that scheme. They are sitting in a playoff push in real life, football, but what does that translate with their game plan for the playoffs? That's the great question we have to ask.
Well, and Dobbins did get hurt, so maybe
He
that
did.
could mean that they rely more on Herbert. But yeah, so
And they got Gus the cowbell.
yeah, Gus Bus, yeah, he's gonna carry him to the promised land. But all right, guys, so we're gonna close out here. This is a little quick hitter episode. We have another trade deadline coming up this week. If anything interesting happens in this one, then we will certainly throw another trade episode in together. And we'll start doing some rookie content towards the end of the season. We're going to start pumping out some stuff. So thanks for staying to the end. We're right at 30 minutes, so this ended up perfectly. Thanks for the good discussion, Marty, and I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday with your loved ones.
Thank you. You do the same. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and if you travel, safe travels, and we'll do this again soon.
See you at the next one.